Well, it's exactly 3 minutes past 8 o'clock in the morning. My name is Priveli Baz. Good morning once again. If you're just joining us right now, this is Twitter Jabs 2. Yes, and we continue the conversation we had on our Twitter Jabs 1, which was in regard to agriculture and climate change in our country. Joining me at the center of this conversation today is Mr. Eric Chizito, who is the Program Manager, the Agroecology and Sustainable Natural Resources Management at Pelham Uganda, which is basically the participatory ecological, yes, land use management is an NGO. So yes, good morning, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, viewers.
Yes.
Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you so much for honoring our invite. So yes, the very first question, I'm just going to dive in. What is Pelham Uganda? What's your mandate? What's your niche? What do people know you for?
Thank you very much. For starters, Pelham Uganda, just like you said, this is participatory ecological land use management. We are a network organization of like-minded institutions that are working together to improve the livelihoods of smallholder farmers through fostering ecological land use management, through sustainability approaches that we use to deliver our mandate to Ugandans. Yes.
So the mandate is basically just as simple and plain like that?
Of course, we have different thematic areas. That is basically we look at, we have 4 thematic leads where we have agroecology and sustainable natural resource management. We have advocacy, where we look at advocating for policies that favor sustainable natural resource management, but also in the interest of our smallholder farmers.
Yes.
Then we have one which is basically looking at agricultural market development, which is basically about business development and also finding markets for these agricultural products. Then lastly, which is basically looking at monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So basically those are the 4 thematic leads that we have within the organization, but which are intertwined, working together to see how do we converse our ideology and also moving forward to our goal to reach out to smallholder farmers.
Yes. So Mr. Chizito, we keep mentioning agroecology, but what's the relationship between climate change and agriculture for, an ordinary Ugandan out there who probably doesn't understand what this even means to begin with?
Exactly. When you look at climate change and also look at the background of our economy, just like you mentioned earlier on, Uganda is an agrarian economy. And when you look at the kind of agriculture we do is all dependent on rainfall.
Yes.
Okay. And now this is a two-way relationship. But the unfortunate bit of it is like the second relationship is basically so much of the negative component of it. Because when you look at climate change, how does climate change affect agriculture? This is the kind of relationship I want us to look at.
Yes.
Because ideally being a rain-fed country, but also the fact that our agriculture is basically dependent on rainfall, whether it rains or not, then basically that means farmers will not be able to produce. So definitely climate change affects agriculture in so many instances. Ideally, look at the instances like, the recurrent droughts now we're having in the country, or the floods. This definitely impact what agriculture or the smallholder farmers are doing. But also, we also want to realize that yes, much as we are an agrarian economy, but again, the kind of agriculture we are doing, which when you look at 80% of our smallholder farmers are dependent, derive their livelihood from agriculture.
Yes.
Of which much of the natural resources they're dependent on, they are also dependent on the rainfall and temperatures. Because when you look at the 2 factors, when you talk about climate change, they are basically rainfall and precipitation. Those are 2 dominant factors that affect all about what brings about climate change. So the mere fact that you don't have all the poor infrastructure in terms of adaptation strategies as a country, this basically also has a very bearing on the kind of agriculture we are doing. And so definitely that has a bearing effect, specifically on the smallholder farmers. You mentioned earlier on that 80% of the smallholder farmers actually who are doing agriculture are women.
Yes.
And when you realize that climate change, of course it affects us all, but the most bearing effect is specifically on women. This is because of their reproductive role and also the kind of work they do. So sequentially, when you look at the aspect that, we are looking at agriculture as the backbone of our economy. But as a government, how much are we doing to see that, we develop the adaptive strategies, or we develop the adaptive capacity of our smallholder farmers, so that they can become climate proof? As Pelham, yes, there is a lot of notion about climate smart agriculture. But we know we are really totally not so much into this, because we are looking at climate resilient agriculture. Because when we talk about resilience, here we are looking at a resilient community that, does have a fallback position. Just in case of a climate shock, we are not seeing that, people will come to West, or there's nothing, people to depend on,
Yes.
So ideally, when we talk about resilience, you cannot develop resilience over a period of time, It is a process, This is where we need to develop the adaptive strategies, to build the resilience of these smallholder farmers over a period of time. So the relationship between climate change and agriculture is two-way in one or the other. So you'll have this positive and a negative relationship, but ideally when you look at what we call the current global agriculture or the industrial agriculture, the use of the monocrops. And this has a very, very strong bearing on our ecosystems. Reason being because there's a use of these synthetic, fertilizers, the pesticides, and all these have a bearing and have an effect on the ecosystem in the long run. But look at the land disputes that we are having. This is because of the big shots that you mentioned that, who have the money will go clear the entire ecosystem. And that has a negative impact on the ecosystem. And definitely, climate change comes into play because already this is deforestation taking place. We have degradation taking place and all habitats are now destroyed. So this is where we come in hand and say, yes, agroecology is a move towards a just, resilient, and a transformation in our food systems. This is because of the most benefits that agroecology has to offer. Because for us, when we talk about agroecology, we're talking about food sovereignty. We are looking at a right to food, the right to seed. We don't want to see farmers, all the time have to go back to the agro input dealer for seed. Because this is what the corporates are doing. The corporate take over the seed system. This is something we really totally against. Because for us, agroecology, this is a social movement, that empowers the smallholder farmers, to advocate for their right, the right to seed and the right to food. Because we cannot talk about food security when we don't have seed security. You cannot talk about food sovereignty when there's no seed sovereignty. So agroecology is all about championing the rights of the smallholder farmers to have a say in their natural system and how they govern the food system, their culture, and the way they blend.
Yes. So, Mr. Kizito, before I get into the next question, I would love for you to, tell us some of the agroecological practices that we have in Uganda. In Uganda. Because I think still people out there do not quite understand agroecology.
Ideally, surprisingly, agroecology is not something very new because, it's just a transformation because this is a systematic approach that integrates the science and indigenous knowledge that our great-great-parents actually have used over a period of time. You look
Could
at...
they have failed to pass down that information to us and we are struggling as a generation
basically,
now?
I think it's just the trend that, we've forgotten all about these kind of principles, but you look at the principles of agroecology and also what it has to offer. Ideally, you look at, it encompasses what we call the organic agriculture principles, the conventional agriculture. So this is systematically in the sequence that it builds into the other to see that we have synergies, diversity coming into play. So ideally, this is not something new, but only that as government, what efforts have government done? Because as civil society, we're simply complementing government efforts. So this is where we're trying to build momentum, through the Agroecology Week of Action to show the world, climate change is here to stay, and we've been affected, But would we sit back and just, relax, saying farmers, we cannot produce food anymore? Absolutely. Because ideally, me or you, we all go to the same market, be it the rich or the poor. By the end of the day, if we don't have access to food, you've seen what's happening in different countries. Just look at the effect of the Russian and Ukrainian war. What has just had on the food system. Now here we go ahead to praise, the global industrial food system. And the very good scenario was the COVID-19. It taught us so many lessons. Yes. Surprisingly, to the smallholder farmers, they were not affected because they had access to food, they had access to seed. Because of that right, the sovereignty that they had. So when you look at it, this traces back to the practices you're talking about. These are the common practices. For example, having a commuter seed bank. In the course of a fallback position, a farmer has access where to get seed. We're not looking at a scenario whereby we're not so much talking about the improved seed, but we are looking at our indigenous seed. For how long are we going to keep on buying seed, when reaching the corporate companies, that farmers have that right to their own seed. That way, you are able to, to ascertain and ensure that, yes, you will have food sovereignty, you'll have seed security at all times. So the different agroecological practices are not so much different from what our great parents have been doing.
Yes.
So look at, water conservation, look at agroforestry, Those are all components, those are some of practices that, are enshrined within agroecology. So this is a systematic approach that, involves the different practices that brings them together. Then we combine what we would call the scientific knowledge and the indigenous knowledge that farmers have held over a period of time.
Well, Mr. Kizito, what is Pelham Uganda doing in order to support farmers and help them combat these effects of the climate change when it comes to agriculture?
Thank you very much. Basically, our role or our mandate, because I said we are a network organization, we have members that subscribe to the network. So our first mandate is capacity building, okay, where we do trainings, to build the capacity of our member organization that will trickle down to the smallholder farmers. Our second mandate is basically to advocate for policies, that will favor the smallholder farmers. Those are policies to do with the aspects to do with the access, to land, because, you know, of the recent land sagas we've had in the country, you know.
Yeah.
We have to get policies that will also ensure that, you know, our farmers have access to financing, you know, the right seed they need at the required time. But also, overall, what we are doing so much is the promotion of agroecology in Uganda. I would be happy to say that, yes, with our stakeholders or other member organizations, yes, we've been able, you know, to scale up agroecology in Uganda. And this is why now we coined the Week of Action, or the Agroecology Week of Action, which is going to run, actually, which is running from today up to the end of the week. So here we are trying to, yes, we are trying to build the momentum, you know, to show the world that, yes, agroecology can work, you know, just like, because, yeah, I'm sorry to mention that, you know, I think we are moving off the track because of what we're seeing, the multiple benefits that maybe industrial agriculture can do. Yes, if at all it can feed the world, why are we still hungry? You know, why do we have still people dying across the world?
Yes.
You know, if really industrial agriculture can do that. So the right and ultimate justified movement for us to move to a sustainable food system is agroecological practices. Because for how long are we going to keep on buying fertilizers? For how long are our farmers going to keep on spraying? These are the cancers now we are seeing, you know, coming up in the country, you know. But way back, if you read literature, you know, they will tell you, you know, Uganda was the backbone of this, you know, ideally to be even in Africa, because we are very blessed that we have a very good microclimate. You know, our weather is very good. We look at our climate, you can't compare it to other countries. So yes, for us as Pelham Uganda, what we are looking at, yes, the move or the justified movement for us to move is agroecology. And this is where we've planned up a week of action where we want, you know, to build momentum. And first, this will be with, we have Yalta, which will be the first of its kind.
Yes.
That will be a youth summit, which is bringing together youth, not only from Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and other different countries. And this will provide a platform for youth to interact. And these are youth in agroecology, you know. Because if you realize that, you know, the youth have been so much left out in agriculture.
Oh, yes.
So, and now we're trying to blend to see, you know, how do we bring youth on board? So this is where we're having youth entrepreneurs who are promoting agroecology. Yeah, so this will be an opportunity for them to network, but also to develop synergies to understand what is working well in Ethiopia, what is working well in Uganda and Kenya, Tanzania. So that's one of the aspects we're trying to do. Then we'll have a maze, that is the Agroecological Market Systems Expo, the first of its kind in Uganda, I would say even in Africa.
Yes.
This is where we're bringing different entrepreneurs, you know, to see, because here we'll have different multiple value chains actors, okay? We are looking at the entire value chain,
yes, basically.
So we will see actors from the academia, you know, who has done what in agroecology, be it research, you know, we've developed an app, an innovation in that regard, you know. So what we are trying to do is to build momentum, you know, for how do we promote agroecology, how do we scale it up, you know, in the different countries of the world. And I'm happy to say that, yes, Uganda, we are not shy, you know, for us what we've done compared to other countries in promoting agroecology. So when you look at NAS, this will be the fourth time we are holding it. This is a bit high level. This is where we have an opportunity to interact with policymakers,
yes, okay,
government departments, ministries, and this is where we put task, you know, duty bearers, you know, to inform them this is what we want to see moving forward. Okay? Yes. Because we've seen that, yes, because it's all evidence-based, because advocacy is all about evidence, you know. So if we want to challenge the status quo, this is what we have to bring on board. So here we will have an interaction. You know, we'll have a team of panelists who will be discussing how do we unlock barriers to scaling up agroecology in Uganda.
Yes. Yes.
And lastly, that will be the climax event, which will be on the 28th. That will be the 12th Annual Indigenous Food Fair. This is our trademark, I would say, for the past 12 years. We've been trying to see how do we restore the utilization of these indigenous food systems in the country. Yes. So ideally here we'll give a platform to farmers from all over Uganda, because remember our mandate is nationwide. So you will see farmers from different regions coming to prepare the different indigenous foods and cuisines from their different regions. And the show dwellers or goers will have an opportunity to come and taste, to see the indigenous food. So this is where you see the Kamajongs coming in with their indigenous food. You will see the Batwa coming in with their indigenous food. You will see the Malewa. You will see the different indigenous foods in Uganda. And basically this is a platform we want to showcase, because some of us may not have that opportunity. We don't have seen some of these traditional food systems. But this is where you have an opportunity, you know, because of, like I mentioned, because of the modern ways how agriculture has been taken on. We've actually tried to forget about our culture and food systems. And it in actual sense, you know, this is what our grandparents grew up on.
To do, yes.
Yes, so ideally that is what we are trying to do, to see how do we build momentum for scaling up agroecology in Uganda. And we think through such kind of initiatives, we want to show government that yes, there's an alternative position, or there's an alternative which is justified, resilient, and sustainable. in the long way.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, you did mention, of course, indigenous foods. You talked about Malewa. I think that is from the Bugisu region, yes. Pretty much interesting. Just like, he mentioned all that is going to be showcased at the food fair. But yes, what are some of those indigenous foods and seeds that we need to preserve as a country, and how can we actually achieve that?
Ideally, we would not make mention of these are the purchases, but as long as it's an indigenous or traditional seed, it's very, very imperative and very important to us,
yes.
Because every region has something that is peculiar to that particular region, because what is indigenous, this particular community may not be indigenous in that particular area.
Community,
you get?
Yes.
And we are very, very much interested, and we are happy to know that you see even the president at one time said, we want to see how we can conserve our indigenous cattle from Ankole. This is also part of the initiative that we are also trying to do. So ideally, any kind of indigenous or traditional seed that that is peculiar to that particular ecosystem or that particular region is very important to be stored. And what are we trying to do to see that yes, we can achieve this? This is one of the platforms. We give an opportunity for people to come and showcase. And this is when now you see the mandate of the government or other institutions like the PGRC, that's the Plant Genetic Resources from Itebe, also come into hand, and actually they will pick some of some of that kind of seed which will be stored in the National Gene Bank. But also what we are trying to do is to build community seed banks in the different regions of the country. So that way we are trying to create a fallback position just in case of anything, a farmer has access because of the climate shocks that come into play.
Yes.
In case of a disaster, say for example, floods have washed away all crops, a farmer will simply just go back, just like it would work like any other bank does. You want to replenish your money, you simply go to the bank. So this is just like what this community seed bank does. But besides that, the capacity building, the training that farmers are given, to what are those best practices for you to ensure that you can be able to save your seed. But also trainings, how do we ensure that we are seed secure?
Yes.
Training from seed production, seed as a business, those are kind of all aspects that we entail and we do. But also, above all, is the advocacy bit, the policy formulation, and also the drive towards, how do we advocate for policies that favor smallholder farmers?
Farmers, yes.
Policies that will recognize our indigenous seed. I'm happy to realize, that at least the seed policy for Uganda, yes, recognizes our farm-managed seed systems.
I like the fact that you talked about smallholder farmers. As Pelham Uganda, how are you helping people with small pieces of land to engage in agroecology?
Thank you very much. Idea when you look at agroecology, since like I told you, it's a systematic way of involving different agricultural practices. You don't need to have a lot of land.
Yes.
For you to be able to feed your family. You've seen what we call urban agriculture.
Yes.
You've seen people doing agriculture in sacks. Those are some of the innovations, that we are trying to promote. Because not every Uganda has an opportunity to have and access land because of the challenges that we're having. But what we are looking at, how do we ensure that everyone has the right to food? So one of the aspects we are trying to promote is like the agroecology can also ensure that we can use the small kind of piece of land, but also to maximize production of food. So urban agriculture, in that sense, also comes in handy.
Yes.
You've seen flats where people have, sack molds, backyard gardens. That are all forms of agroecology. So that way, you're able to ensure that yes, each family has access to food.
Yes. So it's important to note that, out there, you who is out there watching us, it's important to note that even if you have a small piece of land, you can still, participate actively in agroecology. Now let's talk about the cross-dressing of foods. What does agroecology say about this?
I beg your pardon?
The cross-dressing of foods.
Cross-dressing of food.
Yes.
Well, ideally, I would be honest to say that for agroecology, it's a blend, because like I mentioned, food sovereignty. This is the right to food.
Yes.
The right to culture. The right to have that kind of food that you want at the right time. In the right quantities.
Timely,
but also that is nutritious food we're talking about. We're not talking about having food, but we're talking about nutritious food that you can have at all time. So in this context, now we are looking at if farmers have the right over the type of seed, because we cannot talk about food production without seed. That means if I have diversity, that means I'll have diverse food on the table.
Yes.
So ideally that means the more diverse food, the more nutritious food that you'll have at the end of the day. Okay? So in that regard, we are looking at agroecology as diversity. Because for us, agroecology, as we talk about food sovereignty, for us, this is where I'll have access to the multiple benefits of food that I would want to have at the right time, in the right measures, but also in the right quantities in terms of nutritious foods. So agroecology is just food sovereignty. Okay? Agroecology is land. Agroecology is water. It's basically the right for us to own our land, to govern our food systems. And basically, the moment you have the capacity and the right to govern your food systems, ideally you're food secure, and that is the sovereignty we're talking about, just like we talk about Uganda as a sovereign state.
Yes. So how are you helping the youth, pushing the agenda for the youth to make sure that, they actively participate in this, especially the youth who shun farming activities in search for, white collar jobs and being able to sit in office with SE? How are you approaching those particular section of people?
So we took a very different direction, I would say, because we realized, yes, as I'm a youth, but we have different schools of thought. So how do we interest the youth to come and join, this wagon? Okay, we have had a fully-fledged project actually, which is called YALTA, that is Youth in Agroecology Business Learning Track. And this project has purposively targeted the youth to see how do we build momentum on developing innovative solutions for youth, because with now the current global trend, ICT and agriculture. So we see how do we now bring on board youth. So purposively, the project has purposed the youth to see how do we interest them to become part of this. One is it's been through trainings, nurturing for youth that this does better than this, but also creating incentives for youth. If you have this kind of business, how do we promote this agricultural business? The first startup would be a kind of training. You build their capacity in business development that is in line with the development of agroecological products. Then how do we market these products at the end of the day? Because at the end of the day, they are looking at having money in their pockets, because it will not be of any interest for them to grow food and they don't have access to markets. So this is where also we've come in handy to see where are the markets for these agroecological products. Okay. Yes. Then which other kind of innovations do we bring on board to to ensure that youth will have access to markets not only in Uganda but beyond. Okay. Then the kind of interaction, the platform that we've created, this networking. Now youth in Uganda interacting with youth from Ethiopia, from Kenya, from Tanzania, that is also an opportunity for them to pinch, business ideas that they want to develop and take on.
Yes.
So this is one way we've been able to to impress the youth, but also to showcase that yes, there's a business case in agroecology.
Well, as Pelham Uganda, have you faced any sort of challenges in your role of activism?
Of course, very, very much so. Because the most outrageous will be climate change.
Yes.
Yes, that's the biggest challenge that we have, actually, that mankind, that we are trying to grapple with. But also the aspect of interesting government to appreciate, the alternative to the global food system that we are having. Yes, I agree, yes, the industrial agriculture can increase productivity. But if it does so, then why do we still have people go hungry?
Yes.
You get? That is my concern. So this is when we say, okay, we are moving towards, a system trend where we want to see an overhaul to the entire food system.
Yes.
Let farmers have control over their food system in that regard. So not until government will come to appreciate this. And this is being brought about because of the forces of demand and supply from the monopoly countries. I mean the monopolies of the big companies, the likes of Monsanto, who are interested to sell their, their pesticides, to the developing countries, but also the interest, I would call it greed, by some of the market actors, who would want to take over the market share, at the expense of the smallholder farmers,
yes.
So this is also one of the challenges we are grappling with. But also, we are looking at a way, how do we champion to see that, yes, because actually we are developing a strategy for agroecology, Uganda, and this is where we are looking at government support, to come in handy to say that, yes, we have an agroecology strategy. Maybe in the end, how does it also trickle into, the agriculture policy?
Policies, yes.
So these are things now we are trying to grapple with. But I'm glad to say that, yes, at least the Minister of Agriculture has been cooperative, and actually now we are having a very good relationship with them.
Yes.
And actually, for one of the events, we expect the Honorable Cabinet Minister, that is Frank Tumwebas, to grace the occasion. That's the food fair. So, but ideally, yes, of course, there are those challenges that we are still grappling with. But also, how do we interest more youth to come on board? But also the funding within the sector is still very minimal, compared to other sectors. But remember, we are saying this is the backbone of our economy, But how much is allocated to the Ministry of Agriculture?
Would I be right to say that the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries needs to do much more when it comes to funding?
Exactly.
Especially the civil society organizations.
The allocation. And we've done our part, we've really advocated. We've made our voices clear, We look at the Maputo Declaration. What does it state? How much are we supposed to allocate to agriculture? But how much have we allocated to agriculture? Every preceding year, you see it's the budget for agriculture receding down, you'd wonder. And this is where 80%,
yes.
Of the entire population is dependent on, Yes, we appreciate industrialization, development of what, but at the end of the day, also look at climate change impacts, What does that kind of development that we are aspiring to have, what kind of fallback position have we developed, Not everyone will be able to work in industries.
Yes. Well, Mr. Chizito, I need some clarity when it comes to people confirming attendance for these particular events you've organized for the Agroecology Week of 2022. How should they approach that? Is there a form of, registering? Do we just show up and just, participate in these events? What's the procedure?
Actually, when you look at all these events, because we are looking at creating awareness to the public, these are free of charge. We don't charge. Remember, we are an NGO. We are a civil society organization. We are donor funded. Okay, our mandate is to create awareness and also to show people that yes, this is the move we are moving towards to. So for the youth summit, yes, other than those international dignitaries that have been invited, but we've also extended invitations to the youth and different actors. You've mentioned about so many actors, I remember, in the morning show. These are all academia, the private sector. They are all welcome. They are all invited. And actually, all these, because of, looking at the current trend we are in, because of the Ebola outbreak, so there will be some minimal, the physical presence. But these all are going to be streamlined on our media platforms. But also, we will have live broadcast from different media houses.
Yes.
So everyone would have an opportunity to submit and also, to participate fully, be it virtually or physically. For the NAS, of course, it's a bit high level. Definitely, yes, the farmers expected to be there, the academicians, the politicians, and everyone. Yes, it is still open, but we send out invitations, to peculiar kind of actors that we wanted, to see. Because here, we are looking at BIC as a platform to influence policy, but also to call on government to show, hey, look here, government, this, we are grappling with this. It's high time we took over this, for all of this time. So, and for the food fair, basically, because these are show goers, you cannot limit it, basically, and this is where we want people to come and attend and appreciate their local indigenous foods. What we've done, we've also partnered with Red Cross, in case of any kind of emergency, they are on standby to ensure that, yes, we do isolation, we do ABCD, but also we've taken in charge of all the SOPs as mandated by the Minister of Health. Okay. So everyone is invited.
Absolutely perfect. So there's no any excuses that should be given by anyone. You're all invited to the activities that have been organized by Pelham Uganda this particular week. So now, as we wind up the conversation, yes, with the commencement of the Agroecology Week, what should Ugandans look out for as we wrap up, the conversation? Actually,
what I would urge every Ugandan, specifically the youth, this youth summit, the first of its kind in Africa, the first of its kind, an agroecology caravan for youth, bringing youth from the different countries. This is an opportunity for them to network, develop synergies. What is working? What has not worked here? And here we come, to interact and network, to share ideas and learn from each other. And what would the viewers or other Ugandans should look out for through this Agroecology Week of Action is the transformation that we are geared towards changing our food systems. We want to go back to ensure that, yes, the farmers own the food system, and this is the right to food. We are looking at food sovereignty. This is agroecology, is what is advocating for. This is a social movement, where we look at empowering women specifically because they do much of the work, but when we look at the economic benefits or the return on investment, what they do is very minimal.
Yes.
So what would a Ugandan, a lay woman behind there would look out for is to see what opportunities are within the market systems that we are trying to promote here. We also want to show what kind of innovations that have been developed, So many universities here actually are doing a lot of work. You look at Uganda Matters University, they have been having fledged PhDs on agroecology.
Yes.
Mountains of the Moon University. So we'll have all these students come and showcase the different agroecological actors, those who have developed apps, those who have developed different, innovations. All these will be at the expo, We want people to appreciate, come and understand what agroecology is all about. This is not a science, not a giant that is out there. This is something that has been done before, only that has not been popularized. So this is the rationale as to why we call this the Agroecology Week of Action. We want to build momentum for transforming the food system through unlocking those barriers for scaling up agroecology in Uganda.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Eric Chizito, for joining us this morning on Sunrise at Sea. I want to say, special shout out or kudos to everyone at Pelham Uganda for the work that, you continue to do to make sure that all our farmers in Uganda can embrace agroecology. Factoring in the fact that, of course, climate change is not on our side.
Exactly.
Well, I've been speaking to Mr. Eric Chizito, who is the Program Manager, Agroecology and Sustainable Natural Resources Management at Pelham Uganda. Yes, we did talk about agriculture and climate change in our country. Yes, he did give very, very good insight. And of course, for the Agroecology Week that is coming up, it's going to be kicking off actually on Tuesday, tomorrow. Yes, he did say today, but I think it's more of like a media tour. But for all the activities, they'll be kicking off tomorrow at on 25th October 2022, and they will be going up to 28th of October 2022. So as a Ugandan, as a farmer, anyone out there, this is something that you should, actively participate in. Of course, the conversation is going to be continuing on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at SEETV Uganda. Don't go anywhere because coming up is our views. And today we'll be looking at feeling out of place. This is Sunrise at Sea. Don't blink.